welcome everyone. I'm Jeannie Ralston. I'm the co-founder of Next Tribe. And boy, what a year it's been. Who's had a great year? Who all has had a great year? Let's see the hands. No hands. I see 0 hands because it's been a crap year. It's been a shitstorm of a year, as Sherry says. So we've got to figure out, what do we make of all this, what's happened this past year? And Sherry Amatenstein, who writes for us, she's also a therapist in New York. She came up with the idea of let's have a talk about this before we leave this year behind. Let's try to figure out, is there anything worth salvaging? What did we learn? What can we take forward? So I'm going to be turning this over to Sherry, and she's got some guests that she'll talk to. And then we're going to be interacting with you because we want to hear from you what this year has meant to you and what you hope to learn from it. And then, so we'll just have an interaction, and I'll just keep security tight this time.
Yes.
Thanks. Here, I'm handing it over to Sherry. Thank you, Sherry.
I have a bit of a feeling of deja vu. Thanks for being here, everybody. And again, I'm a New York psychotherapist, and I love doing Zooms on Next Tribe, and I host a podcast, Sherapy, Real Therapy with Sherry Amatenstein. And as you all know, a funny thing happened on the way to our first scheduled Zoom 2 weeks ago. We were Zoom bombed, which is not even, I didn't even know it was a thing until it happened. This year has created a series of things that we didn't know were things before they happened, but we're here. And the reason we're here is to try to figure out how to use the shitstorm of 2020, which was the best word I could come up with to describe it. And so we want to use the shitstorm to spin some gold into our lives and find renewed joy and purpose as we go forward into 2021. So before we get started, I'm just going to invite everybody to write in the chat, and this was Jeannie's great idea, 3 words that describe 2020 for you. I will start. My second chance. This February, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. It was caught early. I had surgery, chemo, and radiation. And I'm here with you today. I am incredibly aware of just how lucky I am. Unlike thousands of people whose cancer had progressed further than mine, yet their treatment was delayed, which put their lives in peril. So today I am cancer-free, knock on beanie. And I look around and I see so much suffering, so much pain, and kicks up a lot of guilt for me. Why am I still here? And a lot of questions. I feel like I'm an extra innings. So what should I be doing in my 10th inning and beyond to help others? And I'm not the only one who's pondering these questions, which is why there are so many of us here today. So Dr. Viktor Frankl, a survivor of Auschwitz, wrote in his classic book, Man's Search for Meaning, if there is a meaning in life at all, then there must be a meaning in suffering. Suffering is an eradicable part of life, even as fate and death. The way in which a man, I'm adding, or woman, accepts his fate and all the suffering it entails, the way in which he takes up his cross gives him ample opportunity, even under the most difficult circumstances, to add a deeper meaning in his or her life. And my parents were Holocaust survivors, so that has a real resonance for me. And before I open this up to everybody, I wanted to talk briefly to 2 women. I'm not sure if Dr. Julia Lee Barclay Morton is here. I didn't see her.
Yes, she's here.
Oh, you are here. I'm sorry. No glasses, no contacts, no mind, no anything. So, okay.
Is that your 6 words? No glasses, no contacts, no mind. 6 words.
I always like to add a little more. What can I say? So Julia is a New York City-based author, artist, teacher, and coach. So thanks for joining me here today. You've definitely been having a hard time of it. In March, you were diagnosed, in March you got COVID and you're a long hauler. It struck you hard and you're still feeling a lot of after effects. So you had told me when we had a phone conversation before we tried Zoom number one, that rather than looking at external markers of achievement, you've started thinking about ways to live life completely each day. So how are you doing that?
Imperfectly. I think what I meant, I think I said that much more like, it sounds much more holy than I actually am. I just, what I meant by that is, or what I think I meant by that, because who knows, but is acceptance and acceptance of everything. Meaning that I need to accept my fears. I need to accept my frustrations. I don't know when I'll, X thing will get better. Well, I'm not going to go into all the details because there's no time, but basically just, there's a lot of uncertainty and that goes along with this. And on the other hand, like, because I'm not trying to just suddenly, publish the great American novel suddenly or whatever, I opened up to something like I started painting for the first time in 30 years. I just finished my first painting in 30 years. So, and that's like a whole new part of me, a new old part of me. So things have been rearranged. So it's about being open to, like, there's the negative side of surprise, you have COVID, like, I know really well what a negative surprise is like, but then there's like, okay, but then I think you understand this, it opens you up to other things, right? Just open, like you said, the 10th inning feeling like I'm alive, so yay. And understanding, that there's a multiplicity of realities here. And some are very scary and some are really interesting, and things are opening up internally more than externally. There's a lot of external things that didn't happen this year for me and everyone else on the planet, yeah. So yeah, I mean, we talked about that idea of living in the alone. So yeah, it's about waking up each day and like, okay, now what? Which also can be really scary. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's not like I'm so great at it, it's just that I realize it's actually the only place to be.
Yeah, we can't put on those. I mean, I do every year at this time of year, a longtime friend and I do goals for the year, and then we look at it the next year. And we had our brunch last weekend, my friends and I, and we always first look at the previous year's goals. And like, we do 10 each at least. And one of the goals was travel a lot. Well, so there you go. Everything just got reordered. So now I want to introduce my next guest, Fran Dorf. And Fran is an author, playwright, screenwriter, and therapist. And on December 7th, 1993, Fran was 100 pages into writing her third book when her son had a seizure and went into a coma from which he never awoke. He died on June 1st, 1994. And that trauma led to her putting aside her book, going back to school. She became a social worker and ran support groups for the bereaved. She did eventually publish the third novel and much else in the ensuing years. And COVID has brought about more changes in her search for meaning. So thank you, Fran, for coming. And I found it fascinating that your grief over your son's death led you to doing grief work. And now COVID is leading you to want to put a coda on that, on the running the grief groups and move on. So what's going on for you? How is your meaning in your world being rearranged?
I think that I've learned to ebb and flow with my own creative muse and with the meaning that I found in working with the bereaved. I think it's important to say that I very early on developed a writing practice as a teenager. I've had, I mean, you might call me the affliction queen. You know, I've had many issues in my life. My son dying is, of course, the worst one, but you know, and there was a lot of mental illness in my family, and I started writing early. I developed a writing practice, and then I started writing novels. And my son, in the middle of, I had a 2-book deal with Dutton and could not finish what would have been my third novel, and renounced writing altogether. And then eventually I published Saving Elijah, and I also promised myself that I would go back to school and become a therapist and help the bereaved, because I feel that because I'm so familiar with loss, both from study and from experiencing it myself, that it's like a gift that I can give to others. I think at this point, I'm 67 years old. I just turned 67 yesterday, actually.
Happy birthday.
And, the COVID, I wouldn't say that it pushed me over the edge, but it became too much to do my writing work and to run groups and have an individual practice. So after much difficulty and consternation discussing it with the agency where I run the groups, I've decided to give up my groups. I'm keeping my practice, so I do individual therapy. But it really was interesting and is interesting to see. I mean, I sit with a lot of bereaved people. So for example, a woman of age 65, this is just an example, who has lost a husband, let's say, and now she's stuck she's in this big house, or some house somewhere, and she's stuck there, in COVID. She's lost her husband. She's all alone in the big house, and she's got, the loneliness of COVID and all of the things in addition to grief. So it really is a very interesting phenomenon that we're all, dealing with in our own different ways. And I feel like everybody's sort of having a breakdown. And for me, I just became too much for me too. So I just gave up. I decided I'm going to give up the groups, and that's where I am now. But I will say this personally, my creative side, as it has at various times, has come to the fore. And it looks like I'm going to have a movie adaptation of one of my books. So that is actually pretty exciting. So
let's celebrate our triumph.
Right. But I think my 3 words, I wrote something down. And by the way, I took up painting also. Is that funny? Just because there's so many hours to fill, and I took up painting. I used to do art as a young person and write, and I never did art, but I took it up for the first time, and I've done about 7 paintings. They're not great paintings, but I'm having a good time. But my words would be acceptance, making meaning. This is 4, not 3, and growth. Those would be I always look at everything. There's no other way to me to look at anything in life but an opportunity for growth. And so that's it.
And that's really the best way to look at things, because I think we always have a choice ultimately. I know for me, with COVID and cancer pretty much coming simultaneously, and so having to isolate, except going for treatments and just all of that, it was, and then having to, have surgery and then chemo and then radiation. It was just sort of like, put my head down, my newly hairless head down, and do it. But it also, for me, I developed such a sense of appreciation for all the people who were there for me virtually, because they couldn't come see me, and I just started really being so, I mean, after the initial shock and pain and all of it, I just kind of said, I need to practice what I preach with my patients and try to look at what I'm getting from this, which is, I guess, what led me to want to do this here tonight. So I'm looking in the chat at some of the words that, like Melissa Zellinger, her 3 words are bored, rudderless, grateful. So Melissa, where are you, if you want to elaborate?
I think she has to turn her mic.
Oh, yeah.
Here I am.
Oh,
Can you
okay,
hear me?
great. Yes, I hear you perfectly. Yeah. So what has
Hi.
it been like for you, and how are you searching for the meaning to help give you a renewed purpose to move into 2021 and the uncertainty there?
I think that the thing that I experienced was I'm retired. I'm a widow. I live in a big house on a lot of land, and I have had a very busy life with traveling and, just busy. And I think that COVID, really has made me realize how much I filled up with doing things so that I didn't have to really figure anything out. I had, my husband died of cancer. It was a long drawn out thing.
Oh.
It was, but it was a number of years ago. And so I've really, lived life, I feel like, to the fullest. But I think the other part for me is that I'm at that phase of my life, also 67, where I want to give back. And this is such a hard time to do that. And I feel so stuck because I'm here in my house and, I'm pretty careful about who I'm around and going out and whatnot. But there's so many people in need that I feel very scattered in terms of where do I want to direct my energy and my resources and my talents and my money or whatever it is. Like, how can I make a contribution to make the world better? And I think it's just, that's what's really been hard for me. So all I can say is, is I'm really trying to work on thinking calmly about, out of all the skills that I have, where can it be best used?
Oh.
And what do I need to do so that when things do open up, I can move forward? It's just that limbo time right now that just drives me crazy. So anyway, that's my story. So.
Okay, no, and I
That's
think that's
another story.
commendable. And I think it's also a very common story, too. How can we look and we see we have homes.
Oh
we
my
have,
God. Yeah.
we have so much. I can't speak for everyone,
Yeah.
but, and so you look at what's around us and what's happening. And for me, it's always been about looking outside myself, I think. And that's one of the reasons I became a therapist. Was my midlife career. My first career was in publishing, and I'm still a writer, but because my parents were Holocaust survivors, I had a real sense of I need to give back. And that's why I became a psychotherapist. So, does anybody else want to talk about their words and where they're at and where they want to go?
Can I just offer a couple words? Sure, I forgot to do that. Just
Oh, sure.
two simple words, because it also relates to what just was said, which is this great prayers that Annie Lamott, who's a wonderful
Annie
writer,
Lamott.
and my favorite. And this is going to be I think my New Year's resolution will be her 2 prayers, which is at the beginning of the day to say whatever, and at the end of the day to say enough. And I just think that's kind of amazing. And just in terms of like, whatever, like I'm going to open myself to what needs to happen, and it might not be on a linear grid. And then to know at the end of the day, it's enough, whatever I've been given to do.
And now you need to rest and recharge.
Exactly. Because if you don't do that, you're going to be no good to anybody.
Right. And I'm looking at, there's so many wonderful things here. Christina Wepner, you wrote Embrace the Journey.
Yes, I have. I've spent the last year, I have to say year, waiting for a project to happen. I'm an architect, and I've had other things that have come up in the middle, but there's one particular project that I want so much to have happen, and it's informed my thinking for a year. I've spent a great deal of time thinking about beauty and children's minds. I've been invited to design a preschool. I really, really want to do this project, but it's with the whole COVID thing arriving and everything happening with schooling and remote schooling and New York City money and all of that, exactly how much we're going to have to spend and is it really going to happen and what is going to happen? I just can't, I have no control over it whatsoever. So I've just tried very hard to not think about controlling it or making it be the focus of my life, even though it's informed so much of my thinking process for the last year. So I've gone ahead and done other things and designed other things and had other projects and all of that. And it's been a huge learning process for me to not make it mean anything that this has still been delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed.
Right.
So it's because we are meaning, as they say, somebody said, and people keep quoting, that we're all meaning making machines. I can, of course, decide tomorrow that it's never going to happen. And then, of course, it won't ever happen. So I'm not deciding that. So that's where I am. And that's what I meant about embrace the journey. I work out of my home anyway. So being here during COVID was not such a gigantic change or anything like that. It was not for me. And this, by the way, is not my home. This is a project I designed for other people. It's a loft. I only wish my home were this big and empty.
Well, I was going to say that's a lovely advertisement for you.
Thank
because
you.
It's,
Thank you.
I want that. It's lovely.
I want it too, but it's not mine, except spiritually, of course. And I could do it again if I wanted, and for anybody who wanted it. But
And yeah, no, that's great. And I think like you mentioned the word spiritually, and I think for myself, certainly for Julia, for Fran, for so many of us, I think the upside of the grief and the pain and the limbo and the fear is always so much spiritual growth.
yes.
So if anybody else wants to speak to that.
Sherry, I know that, oh, wait, first, go ahead, Fran, sorry.
I was just thinking when you were talking about this project that's been on hold, that it makes
Yes.
me think of how I've at times in my life with my writing particularly, where I have to say to myself, if you're too caught up in the outcome, you're not in the process.
Right.
You know,
I got that.
the more you worry about, what's going to happen, in my case, is this project going to sell, the less you can be in the process. And for you, the process is maybe embracing other things that do come your way. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
It does. And they're all great distractions. And the more I can involve myself and commit myself on every project, the better the project turns out anyway. So that for me, it's just part of who I am. I mean, I was in the theater as a designer for many years before I went to architecture school. So I have that kind of 24-hour-a-day mentality in terms of an utter commitment to whatever it is, and the show must go on and deadlines and all of that. I mean, that's just who I am.
Though COVID has changed that.
Well,
the show must go on, and
for the theater, absolutely.
The show is different. The show is different.
My husband is a stage manager, and his shows are not going on.
Right, exactly. And I think and I want to hear from some other women too. I mean, this has led us to just go. Gina, you had wanted to say something.
Patricia Greenberg had said she would go. So when you're ready.
Oh, sure. No, Patricia, sure.
I thought you were done.
So I'm happy to allow myself to be interrupted. I don't want to go off on a long-winded tangent. Okay.
Hey, everybody, I'm loving hearing. It's hitting every point here. I'm devastated by this year. My husband and I were sick with COVID early. I had a surgery in February, minor parathyroid. If anybody doesn't know what that is, it's a little gland behind the thyroid. and I had to have it removed. And it's, all surgeries are surgery, but it was fairly minor in the grand scheme of surgeries. And I holed up in the house. And then this virus started emerging. And we went to synagogue on the holiday of Purim. For those of you who don't know that, it's not a minor Jewish holiday, but a lot of people don't know about it. They call it the Jewish Halloween. And you go and you celebrate and everybody gets drunk and it's a big party. And we just got there and the rabbi said, nobody touch each other, nobody go near each other. You know, it was early on. And lo and behold, by Saturday, my husband was ill. By the following Wednesday, I was ill. In fact, a story was published about us. He was sick for 6 weeks and it was so frightening. He was concurrently being treated for prostate cancer. And before his radiation started, he slipped and smashed his ribs.
Oh.
And even though I was well, I'm very fit. I'm a nutritionist and fitness enthusiast. And I didn't sail, but I was sick for about 5 days. But it was like everything around me. We have lost 12 friends to COVID. I turned 60 all alone. We are 60 and 74, and we have a 19-year-old, and she had to get ripped out of her program in Israel, come home, started college in Boston, got ripped out of her college. And now I want her home with me. I want the family unit together, and she doesn't want to be here. She doesn't want to be a 19-year-old trapped in her house with nowhere to go and nobody to be with. So she's staying with, we live in Los Angeles, and she's staying with friends of my family in New York. The loneliness for me has been beyond, and it's inhibiting. I've written 4 books. Jeannie and I have been working together for about a year now. I taught some classes. If I have to teach another class online, I'm going to scream. I'm sure many of you relate to that. I'm in a bad place. I'm reaching out because the toll this has taken on me has been horrendous. What am I looking for? I was just, a closing thought, if you will, is the thing that came out of it is, you know, when you turn 60, when you have death, Sherry, I'm American, my husband's European, my in-laws were Holocaust survivors. My mother-in-law was with us until 101. Could you imagine? She died at 101, not too long ago, a couple of years ago. She was living with us. And I've learned with age, not whether you're 40, 50, 60, doesn't matter. You have to do what's good for you. You just do. I'm way past it's selfish to take care of yourself and you feel, you know, like a bad mother if you tell your kid, go make your own dinner. I'm past that point. That's the one beautiful golden silver lining, whatever that came out of this, is I will not do what's good for other people at my own expense ever again.
I love that.
Ever again.
Yeah.
2020. Anyway, I'll mute because I want to hear from other people.
Okay. Yeah, no, 2020 has been a great teacher. And that's kind of what this is about. What is it, along with the pain and the loss, what is it teaching us about how to move forward? Who else wants to speak?
Can I just want to say something to that too, what she said, because I think it's really important. I really relate to a lot of what Patricia just said. And sometimes, I mean, if you can make something, quote, positive out of a thing, great. But sometimes you just need time to hold space for what really frickin' sucks, you know? And like, that's super important in my mind. And to have people and spaces that can hear the suffering as well. And yeah, one hopes one learns something and this and that and the other. And then that
you have to go through the stages. It's not,
yeah,
you know, oh, I'm not going to allow myself to feel this and mourn and angry and get all those things. It's just, how can we still move forward in the best way we can? And yes, our plans got rearranged, upended, but we're still here. So what are we here for? And again, my question coming out of all this is, what, after all of this, what am I here for? I'm still alive. I'm still here. What am I here for? How did I make it and others didn't? So who else wants to speak?
While people are deciding if they want to speak or not, I just want to say that one thing for me is
Yeah.
a feeling of, I wrote about this, but I don't think I'll ever have that fear of missing out again. Not that I had it, completely, but it kind of like hit me in the face that, you know, I'm where I'm right with my family right now is where I'm supposed to be. And I'm not like thinking there's something I should be doing. And I want to hold on to that feeling of like where I am right now is important. And this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I guess that's in other words, that's, focus, being in the present, but I guess that's another way of saying it. But I feel that more than ever, that the importance of that. That's what I want to hold on to, is that feeling like what I'm doing right now, I want to concentrate on. I don't want to think about all of could-haves, would-haves, should-haves, and all of that. I want to think of where I am at the moment and embrace it.
And what does embracing it mean? Because that's a word that I saw coming up in people's 3 words. So how do we embrace something that we wish to hell we'd never had to deal with and look at?
My son went through kind of a military training. They had the phrase for when he was being in his training, his freshman year in college, and called "embrace the suck." And I guess it just means understand that. And I guess maybe we've all been. I know I have. I've not maybe been as challenged in life, and this is, to me, is like this year's been the biggest challenge. So how are we stepping up to it? How are we facing it? Are we facing it like, okay, this is, it's terrible, but I'm going to get through it. I mean, we're going to get through it. And just realizing that for so many people throughout human history, there have been agonizing times, and I guess that's how I try to kind of
many sucky times.
I try to look at, sometimes I try to look at the historical aspect of it, perspective, and then I also think of the people. And I think somebody else said this. That there's people who are. I just think there's people who are just suffering so much more than and that it kills me sometimes when I think about the people who are, just living paycheck to paycheck, and how are they doing this? And anyway, maybe that gets me down more, but maybe, I don't know. But I'm trying to look at different perspectives, trying to get new perspectives on facing hard times, I guess.
I don't think you can embrace. I think you have to be able to do it yourself. Somebody can't tell you, because it feels invalidating if you say, you gotta get past this, and you have to validate that it really does suck to be in this sucky time, or whatever happened to you, like what happened to you. That has to be validated.
Yeah, it's here. It is. We're in the big suck. So yeah. And there's always going to be something. I mean, before this, probably the worst thing, because I've learned it's about not fighting it, and just, as was said before, accepting it. I mean, years back, I was hit by a car, and I was in interim amputation. Ironically, I was actually the next day going to be going on a Windjammer barefoot cruise. Well, that clearly did not happen, but I wound up having 3 surgeries, 2 years of physical therapy, and it's permanent arthritis in there and damage. Not that I was going to be an Olympic runner anyway, but I remember for me, for like the first 2 years, I'd be sitting, and then I'd get up, and these pincers of pain would go into my ankle, and I'd be so upset. Like all over again, I would just be angry. Like, why did this happen? And it's not fair, and just all that stuff. And then once I was walking down the street feeling sorry for myself because my ankle was bothering me, and I was limping because my ankle was bothering me. And then, I mean, this sounds like a made up story, but then I literally saw a homeless man with one leg and a crutch going through a garbage, and I was just like, oh my God. And here I am feeling sorry for myself. I have two legs. I have a home. I'm not, in this kind of position. And something just opened up for me in that moment. And I stopped fighting the pain and the, I'm sorry-itis thing, which was, I think, my worst illness. I'm sorry for myself-itis. And I felt so lucky. I just gave into it. And now, since then, and this was decades ago, I'm just much better. When my ankle acts up, it acts up. I'm grateful when it doesn't. And it really is about like where we go with it. Does that mean that if I had it to do over, I would still be hit by the car? No, clearly not. But it happened. And it's a journey. It's not, and maybe embrace. I've come to embrace it, but it was there. It was like, what can I get out of it, instead? And again, I'm happy I still have two legs. So that's why this is about what can we take from this shitstorm of a year going into 2021, and hopefully, we'll be getting the vaccines and things will open up, but nothing will take away what we've gone through this year. Nothing. So where do we go from here? How do we become deeper? And I think it's on that spiritual level of this is deepening me as a person. Where do I want this to bring me? You're raising your hand?
Yeah, you're
Patricia?
calling on me, Sherry? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I saw the hand. So we're like,
I wanted to, I guess it's kind of a comment question to the therapist out there. How do we address the idea of I had personal losses. We've all had, everyone knows somebody that died or something happened this year that was huge. What about the collective, every day you turn the TV on and thousands of people are dying, thousands of people are not just sick, on ventilators. People are losing their jobs, their businesses, their homes. I mean, the collective devastation.
Yeah.
I can't turn the news on anymore.
Yeah.
In fact, if I go to do it, Aaron says, shut that fucking thing off right now. Aaron says, don't, my husband says, just get shut. We watched a Disney movie on the Disney Channel last night. That's the extent of I can't look at it anymore.
Yeah.
What are some thoughts on how to, besides shutting off the TV?
Right. If anybody else wants to say something, they can. If not, I think, like, for me, which has sort of led to this, I've probably had medical appointments this year around 80 times. It's just, it's insane. It's crazy, when I look at it. But when I go there, when I had the cardiac CT the other day, I was just, talking to the young woman who was doing it, and we just had such a wonderful conversation. And I just expressed all my gratitude to her for all the sacrifices that all healthcare workers have made this year. And I asked her about her PTSD and the PTSD of her peers. And, she's young, she's like in her mid-20s, and she has like a younger brother and sister. And she said they've definitely decided, watching her this year, that they never want to go into the medical profession. So I think we have like this collective PTSD. I mean, we are forever changed. How can you, and plus we don't have that certainty, the things that we used to take for granted. We would just go out and meet a friend and hug them and, be spitting all over the place and not even think of it as spitting all over the place. And, all the theater subscriptions and concerts and this and all these things we took for granted. And, oh, I'm bored and I'm restless and I'm this and I'm that. And now our lives are in very, like mine, I feel like it's in a box, but I'm happy in my box. I feel safe here. I feel secure. It's now like the outside is still kind of scary and threatening. I'm trying to get myself more over that part of it somewhat, as long as I do all my self-protective stuff. But, now I like being in my cocoon. I don't want to always just enjoy being in my cocoon, but I've accepted it and I get a lot out of that now. So moving forward, I think it's going to be scary to get out of that and go forth again into the world. I mean,
I think that one thing I think is that what we've lost is that sense of limitless possibilities, or that like okay, I could just get on a plane tomorrow. I could do could have anything you wanted. Obviously, money it limits you, but there was the idea that you could just do anything you want. We're not used to being told you can't travel, you can't do this, you can't do that. And so I think there's a kind of, for me, there's just a bit of a sadness that we've lost that idea. Maybe we needed to, but there is something that like we've lost that feeling this year.
Maybe it'll help us appreciate it more when we get it
when
back.
we have it back.
I
Yeah,
think
it's like just like walking outside now. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to go walk the dog. I put on my outside clothes. I put on the mask. I put on it's like, oh my God, and then I get mad when I see somebody without their mask. It's like, if you had said this at the beginning of the year, like, on the cusp of last New Year's Eve, I would have been, are you insane? What are you talking about? And here we are.
This is Catherine. I really identify with what you've said, Patricia. I think that the nation is going to need to reconcile with what's happened. It's been very traumatic to watch the unfolding of something we knew was going to happen. And I lost my father about a month ago to COVID. And it is very hard to watch the television and to see it unfolding still, and to not see our nation come together. So I often don't turn on the television. I do a lot of other things and writing sometimes, but just whatever I need to make it through right now, through the grief. But my dad was offered hydroxychloroquine at the hospital, and he's a doctor, and he knew that medicine was not supposed to be offered. And so the trauma is deep, to know that those kinds of things were happening, even though we as a nation knew better, had more capability.
Yeah.
So it is a trauma that I think, I hope we have a day of national mourning eventually, and reckoning with what's happened. But I was saying to a friend yesterday, it's not like I just lost my dad. It's looking out in the world and seeing it happen over and over. And that I think is the part that's traumatic. And not being able to be with him by Zoom and everything that came along with it. So I agree with you, Patricia. I think this is a bigger conversation as a nation, which hopefully we can have in 30 days, because I don't know about you, but the threatening behavior has shut me down in terms of speaking publicly. And I often speak publicly about things. So I think that the impact has been quite deep, and it may take us a while to sort through.
Catherine, if I can recommend to you, prior to this, I lost 8 family members in 2 years.
Oh.
Close family members, my parents, aunt, and some of it was not natural causes, but some of them were a little easier than others.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And grief group saved me. And if you can find an online grief group of fellow grievers who've lost people to COVID, I think even though it's online now and it's not ideal in person, is always Fran can attest to that, I'm sure, and Sherry that, and Julia. But that got me through. I mean, my family was dropping like flies. And then just when we thought we could recover, my husband got sick and then COVID, and there was no relief. And I still do some online grief groups, so I can't recommend it enough. You might have to bounce around a little bit till you find your group. You might want women only, you might want your age group only. Some of them are specific to losing a parent, but it's out there. Maybe the therapist can help you find someone, but that was a lifesaver for me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, no, I think the groups that I ran have been very, very helpful to the people. And we had some COVID losses in the group. You can find that. It is helpful.
Yeah, and I see Jeannie just wrote in the chat, at least 356,000 more people in the US have died than usual since the pandemics began in the spring.
And it's not just COVID, it's other diseases, and I imagine lack of treatments or something. But
right.
I mean, when you think of that number, it's just like there's so many people who are suffering like Catherine is, and other people who've lost loved ones from COVID or anything. And, it's just one thing to see the stats. My husband has the news hour on, I just outside a different room. And, they talk about the numbers, but then when you think and you hear somebody like Catherine, and that's so, it personalizes it so much. Every one of those numbers is somebody suffering.
I mean, this is staggering. I remember 9/11 being in New York then, as I'm in New York now, and that was just devastating and scary and all that loss. And for so long we had the posters up, looking to see a loved one who was there at the towers that day and not found. And it just went on, and we all just felt our safety, our sense of safety was taken away. We were unmoored. That was a big propellant for me. I did volunteer work at Ground Zero, and then I, wound up volunteering at a suicide hotline. And then that's when, after that, I went to social work school and became, a therapist. So I think using these things, yes, it is unbelievably sucky, and yes, we have to go through and feel it all, and this is like unimaginable. And I do agree. I mean, we need healing on a national level. We're so torn up as a country. I mean, the distrust, the hatred, the antipathy. I mean, it's just that wearing a mask became a political thing. It's awful. It's awful. But this is where we are. And I think, as Jeannie said before, our country has been in other horrible places in the past and come through. And I just wanted to mention too, Jo Beth McDaniel gave a really good suggestion. Hope Edelman, she has an after grief group as well, and she's written books. So if you kind of Google after grief, that might also be like a good resource for grief groups. And
the other thing that we haven't mentioned, we're talking about COVID, but of course we had George Floyd and all that. So I mean, those are other things that we need to maybe talk about. Like, it's just it was like one trauma on top of each other, on top of another. So maybe if people want to talk about that too.
Well, I was going to just add to that, Jeannie, that I think part of it is, there is this political aspect, not only obviously to the George Floyd thing, but also to the COVID thing, because as we all know, a lot of this didn't have to happen. And, the way it has unfolded, and there was some intentionality to, hurting certain states. And I'm in one of them. I'm in New York City, and that, as we know now, was intentional. And so like that's a different kind of, you know, you're talking about, and the same with George Floyd, and for a different reason, and that goes on for many more years, and it's bigger in a lot of ways. But in both ways, it's like this knowledge that there's kind of an implicit and in some cases active attack. It is really scary, and so I felt that even before I got sick, and then I got sick, and I was just watching my city just. You know, I live where there were ambulances 24/7, and the woman who ran the ER committed suicide. I mean, I live up in Inwood. It's a poor area, and you know, so like that's real. That's a real part of this. It's not just a side part. So I'm glad, Jeannie, you brought that up. I just had to sort of. This is not just about sickness and individual. Yes, there's individual loss, and it's all horrifying. Every single individual loss is horrifying too, but as with the Holocaust, as with things, you know, there are other things going on that cause those griefs.
I think that's also another area where there was no action. You know, there was so much outpouring, such a large healing moment. And there was an effort to pass legislation, and then it was just stopped. So it's like even the effort to make the change or express or to do something positive out of something so horrific was also stopped, you know. So it's just been a lot of that, and I add that George Floyd situation to it, you know. Just tough year.
So many things.
I think that you're all bringing such incredible points up. We also have people who are, there's the political, and I hope we can all work through that, whatever side of the fence you're coming from. There's young people now who are afraid of the police, have no faith in the police. You know, we grew up, at least I did, I'm 60. I grew up respecting elders. I respected my teachers. I respected the police department, the fire department, the military, the president. The president to us was, you know, we respected our president. We never said a bad thing about them. And this is really, really a problem that people in 2000, we're going into 2021, and people are more afraid of society. We should be at a place in the world where we're not afraid of society. We're not afraid to go walk down the street. We're not afraid we're going to die of a disease or an attack or go into a building and get blown up. I mean, this is so above and beyond the addition to COVID of all this other stuff.
I like what Bren is Bren want to talk about what she's written, which is really interesting.
Resilience. Yeah. Yes. In the chat. Thank you, Bren.
Yeah.
Finding meaning in loss that can help us not only cope, but find joy and transcendence in the midst of grief. And that it's historically been based on a sense of we're all in this together. And this time we don't have that sense of we're all in this together. And that is true. I mean, 9/11 united us. This has not united us, but it is, and it's horrible, but it is also a learning opportunity. I mean, I keep hoping whenever horrible things happen in the world, some genocide, some tragedy, something, we will finally, as a society, as a world, learn from it and become more humane and caring. And it's hard to see that. It's there. I mean, it's definitely there, but it's very disheartening to look at all the things that not just stay the same, but seem to get worse. So what should we do in the face of that? And that's why I think the word resilience is a wonderful word, because if we don't have resilience, if we don't keep going, what do we do? And that's why I always look for meaning in horror, because otherwise, like, why was there a Holocaust? Why was there all these things? There has to be some lesson in it. That's kind of one of my, I guess, defenses, one of my coping skills, one of my things. I'm not going to always know a why, because there isn't necessarily a why. For me, it's about, what can I learn from this? How can I grow? How can I give back? And other people have said the same thing. We can only do so much, but I think if all of us, at least in our small way, do that and contribute to it and put it out there, it's helpful. I mean, and right before the pandemic started, the end of January, and I've mentioned this before here in past Zooms, I guess, I went with a group, the Sisterhood of Salam Shalom, Muslim women and Jewish women, and we went together to the border in Tucson, and it's about it was sort of like two groups that have been the subject of prejudice and that have reasons to distrust the other, coming together for that, to help others. And also open up our discussion about what do we have in common. There's always things that we have in common. Always some good in there, something, some fear, some belief, So yeah, so we can't reconcile this. I mean, and yes, next Friday, the ball will drop. There's not going to be a huge crowd of people this time, but there's still going to be a ball dropping, and be watching it from home and saying goodbye to this shitty year. But how do we make 2021 a better year?
I like what Carol Gable says. It's made her more of an activist. Maybe we should do a hands of people who feel like they're more of an activist after this year.
It's a good question. Yeah.
I mean, I definitely feel like it's broken any kind of complacency we've had, right? So
I've learned so much. I worked the polls for the first time. I worked the campaign for the first time. I mean, there's just so much I was always too busy doing. I didn't have time for this, and now I had time for it, and I feel much better. I feel like I really grew. I mean, I know it's terrible, but we have to step up and speak out, because otherwise it's not going to change.
Finding purpose in our pain, finding some way to put it forward, and make a mark and help. And it was also mentioned here before, the importance of building community, because when you feel alone, and there's such solitude. It's my sister just moved from New York to Florida, and not that we were seeing each other a lot, but and now I really don't know when I'm going to see her again, because I'm not getting on a plane till all this is over. That's for sure. I mean, we have to find ways to come together. And I think for me, it's always been about, what can I do? What can I pour myself into to have this be for something? Because when it feels for nothing, that's when it's the hardest for me.
I'd like to ask everybody a question. I'm curious about how many of the people here have stopped watching the news or reading the newspaper. I mean, has everybody stopped?
No, I'm going to keep paying attention.
I read the paper. I mean, I read the Times and I read the Washington Post. Not all of it, not every day, but I definitely read chunks of it. I cannot watch the news, and I cannot bear hearing that man speak. That's it. Say that.
That's right.
Cannot
I turn it
stand
off
it.
when he comes on.
Yeah.
But I do watch. I'm curious. Is everybody? So you?
Well, I mean, I watched Judy Woodruff on PBS NewsHour because I respect her. I'm certainly not going to watch, other things. There's so many different types of news out there. You got to get
true.
It's true too. We need to be
intelligent.
discriminating and selective, and and when we feel we need to stop, listen to our body, listen to our soul, and say, I just need to smell a flower or whatever right now. I just need to watch, Frankie and Grace. I just need to do whatever.
Or Soul. Somebody mentioned a Disney movie. Soul is pretty wonderful.
Soul. Yes, watch that.
Joy.
Night. Yeah.
I just want to say that I've one of the things I've been thinking about this year, and I hope people don't think sounds too gushy, but I've really become so committed to beauty as a transporting spiritual experience that if you just look out a window and see a cloud kind of moving in that kind of magical way, or watch the light hitting a building, or look at a flower, or dappled sunlight, or any of that, I am swept away. And when I come back, I am not the same person. And I'm not in the same frame of mind. And it just takes a second. It's not long at all. It's like meditation, but there's no like breathing and whatever. It's just, I'm just taken away and I come back and it's different. So I really, and I get chills when I talk about it. I just think it's so important. So,
And
How many other people have found new things that they do that give them some peace or some feeling of a pause or beauty or appreciation in this year when we've had to slow down so much and not just do 80 things a day?
I went back to my roots of knitting. And when I was really little, like under 10, one of my grandmothers, my great grandmother actually taught me how to knit, and I'd go in and out. And this year I've probably made 30 scarves and I've given them out to people who maybe are going through some sort of illness or emotional distress. And I just keep whipping them out, and it's been wonderful. I don't charge for it. Everyone says, you should charge, you should make a business. You know, no, the whole idea was to, like, is it Christina said, lose yourself in the beauty of it.
In
And
the awe,
time
yeah.
stops, you know, and you be creative, and what stitches am I going to use and what colors, and it's taken me away. It's been very therapeutic, actually.
I'm
And
so glad you can
gratitude
knit
is always the
everything
big
that
one.
I don't knit.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just say.
I have a question. I wonder if people can comment, and if this is okay, Sherry, on whether life is, are we going to be the same as a country? Are we going back? I mean, people say, oh, it's going to come, people are going to forget all about this, and then everything's going to be the same. And you know, and I'm wondering if other people think that we're changed for good, or we'll go back into our other ways.
I just have to say this. I've done an awful lot of reading during this time, and I really do not think that it's all like horrible people who are Republicans and assholes and brain damaged and what have you. The Democrats have not been particularly compassionate, understanding, gotten what it is that Republicans have problems with. I think that there are many people who are Republicans or independents who voted for that man, and they did so because they were really disgusted with what the situation was. And it's up to us, as being, I like to think, the more forward-moving thinking group, to do something about the situation in general, and to really speak to those, the other part of the people who feel so unheard, and they really are unheard, and they need to be helped, because they're in terrible predicaments out there in the middle of America. I mean, we really are in a very special kind of a place here in New York.
Well, we're not all in New York. I'm in Texas.
No, I understand. But I mean, I'm just saying, those of us who are in New York who think we get the diversity and that there are problems and what have you, I have no idea what it's really like in Indiana. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's really different out there in other parts of the country. So
You know what? I felt that way after 2016, but I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, I think about my family in Kentucky. There have been generations of poverty. There have been generations of promises. And instead of looking at those failures to actually come through and the perpetualness of that, it's blaming people of color. And I don't think that's acceptable anymore. So I thought that they were not heard in 2016. But after everything that our country has allowed that are so outside the bounds, I think there's a need to actually ask for some accountability. And also financially, you know, it's just, I don't know. I think about my family in Kentucky and I feel sorry for them.
I just
that
want to
they've had
say, I think there are a
generations.
lot of different sides to the question. And I certainly do not like the whole, it's all really the fault of Black people or people of color in general. I mean, and I don't want to sound, I know my words are simplistic. I'm just saying that there are people who are there one way or another, but I just think that it's a complicated issue, and it's not all the Republicans, I guess.
And just to kind of get back on track as we're in our final moments, and just also if you want to look at past Zooms, we did a Zoom on Next Tribe. COVID time, I don't even know how long ago it was.
It was soon after the election. So
right, it was right after the election, and we did it. There were 3 Republican and 3 Democratic women, and the idea was to really just listen to each other, just talk and accept, and not to get into those dark holes. And it was really interesting. So if anybody wants to go check that out.
I'll put the link in here.
Yeah.
That would be great. Thanks.
Yeah.
I'd appreciate
that. But
I think want to say one other thing that because I've lived in small town Texas, and I don't know if I said this before, but your point, Christina, about what people in Indiana feel like, the crazy thing about living in like a rural area or small area is that I think you have to be more open-minded than you do living in New York City. And I've lived in New York City, and I've lived in a tiny town, because you are brushing up against people who are not like you, that you might have painted as the devil before, but then they're your neighbors, so you can't be mean to them because they're going to help you when your car gets stuck in the rain or whatever. So it really is, I think that, what we were trying to do with that other Zoom is to get people talking, so we're real people, expose ourselves to people who think differently, to see that they're humans, and they have some of the same wants and needs, and so you can understand them better. But I don't know how much we succeeded in that. Sherry, did we all love each other at the end?
I mean, we didn't like virtually hug and say kumbaya, but I do think that there were some people who really did start looking at the other side and not just villainizing everybody as a whole, which is kind of, I think, what we wanted to do. And everything is a beginning. And I think the whole idea of it is keep on going.
Right.
Like this Zoom is a beginning on this year has been, just Shitstorm doesn't even begin really to describe it. So what are we taking from it, and how do we move forward? We're not the same. When you go through and there are people here who have lost people close to them. None of us are the same. And some of us, there are several people here who've had COVID. I mean, I dealt with cancer. So we're not the same. These experiences do change us. We're not going to be the same, that sense of safety. I mentioned earlier, I'm a child of Holocaust survivors. I always felt that New York City was safe. This country was safe. And then I call him Drumpf in charge, for the first time, I did not feel safe. So it's like, where do we go with this? So this is not a Zoom where we're finding answers, but I think it's helpful. Like, if community is really important. I think we should all it is good. And a lot of you do this already, like journaling, every day is good. Like if you could just write for 10 minutes straight, no stopping, no, erasing, no, or crossing out if you're doing it in a real notebook or whatever. Just, I think a good prompt maybe is, who are you looking to become on your continued journey in this gift called life?
And Sherry, we've had Patricia wrote me a note saying, next time can we break into
small groups?
Small groups, it's a great idea, but we haven't really planned this as a series, but I guess I'm just, maybe Sherry and I need to talk about this, but maybe I'll just get some feedback from those of you here. Is this something that we, I mean, as kind of a series, a regular thing, or what? Or do you have your own community that you can go to?
Well, I have a community, but it doesn't talk about this.
Oh,
So I think,
Yeah, I mean,
mostly
I think
my
it would be
community is
great.
business oriented connections. And so people just avoid politics or anything that has to do with philosophy, really.
And I
Jeannie-
think yeah, I mean, this is about exploring, sharing.
I was just going to say, in another group that I belong to, one of them is a business network and one of them is just kind of a get to know each other group for a senior services that we do. And we have a meeting for 30 minutes, then we break into small groups, just depending on how many people there are, for just 10 minutes. And then we get back on again for the remaining 15 minutes and talk about what people learned. So just a thought if we're going to do any more of this going forward. Yeah.
okay. Well,
I just want to say that one of the most hopeful things for me this year truly was seeing the outpouring that came after George Floyd. Of all people, small towns, big towns, the whole world. And it just gave me so much hope that there is that energy pushing forward that wants something different to take us to the next level. And I think this group has been a wonderful reminder of that. Thank you so much.
and I do want to encourage you, all of you, of course, Next Tribe, I guess most of you know what Next Tribe is because you found us here, but we do try to build that community. It's harder now, of course, because we're virtual, but we used to have live events in different parts of the country, and we were experimenting with small groups and cities, but maybe we can get back to that. But we do our best, and we do try to, in the articles, just talk about some of these things that we're discussing today. So anyway,
And I mean, I think that that's a great idea, you know, Jeannie, to check out. I mean, Next Tribe publishes some really great stuff, and it's about, I think, you know, this is all about community and sharing and finding our places to talk about stuff, and then help each other find our meaning, I guess, in all this craziness. So,
well, I'll be writing an email to all of you here, and then you can give me direct feedback if you'd like. But I want to thank Sherry again for doing this. You're so wonderful at this, and I want to thank Fran and Julie for coming and sharing your wisdom. All of you that made this even better, because you've been real and you've expressed your hearts. And so who knows, maybe we'll meet again on this subject. But in the meantime, Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you all.
yes,
Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year. Yes, to all of you.
better.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
I have an advent calendar that ends on January 20th.
Ah,
It's a joke,
It's
sort of.
hilarious. Thanks to all of you. Take care.
okay.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Jeannie.
Thank you. Thank
Bye,
you so much.
everybody.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining. Bye.
Can't seem to end it. Oh, there.